You are listening to ABR034, simplifying productivity for small business owners everywhere. If you are looking for 1% improvements that add up to big results, this is the place for you. Every week, we learn about simple systems and tools that will help you build the business and life you've always wanted. Now here's your host, Zachary Sexton.
Dorie Clark is a marketing, branding, and management consultant, also the author of 3 best-selling books. Well, 2 of them are best-selling. One of them's coming out and is going to be best-selling. First one's Reinventing You. Is all about creating a personal brand that will make you unique in the environment. Stand Out is about becoming a recognized expert. And her latest book, Entrepreneurial You, is about diversifying your income stream. So it's a great conversation. And actually, in the making of the show notes for this podcast, I was Googling the word entrepreneurial, and I was doing that to make sure I spelled it correctly. And hint, I did not, but Google figured it out, and also thought I would like to know the definition of the word, so it gave me the following. Entrepreneurial, adjective, characterized by the taking of financial risk in the hope of profit. So entrepreneurship, by definition, is risky. Or is it? The question of riskiness depends on how you think about risk. If you choose to have a job, that's fine. You've got one steady income stream. That income stream is called a paycheck. Steady seems less risky, but what happens if you're let go from that job? 100% of your income goes away. That's what happens, and that's what happened to my guest, Dorie. She had one income stream, and it got taken away at literally the worst time it could be. But that was many years ago, and she's gone from a single income stream disappearing to an entrepreneur with multiple income sources for herself. So we talk about her journey and how she created economic stability with a diverse set of income gathering options that online entrepreneurs now have access to. So sit back and enjoy this conversation with Ms. Dorie Clark. Dorie, your books lay out the various stages of your career, and I always like that because you're very honest. You don't paint just rose-colored picture. Everything you've done has been amazing. You talk about the good and the bad, some mistakes that you've made, and some things that you've done relatively well, and some things you would have done better. But so people can get a sense of your origin story. Do you mind telling us where you started your entrepreneurial leap, or maybe it wasn't so much of a leap as a shove back in 2001?
Yeah, it was a shove, that's for sure. I was a print journalist, and I had been doing it for about a year right out of grad school. And unfortunately, one day I got laid off without any warning. And in 2001, it actually really was without warning. No one was getting laid off then. The internet was only just starting to disrupt newspapers. And so it was really surprising. I had a week's severance pay, and I had to somehow figure out what I was going to do. And even more frighteningly, I actually was laid off on Monday, September 10th, 2001. And so the next day when I was supposed to be starting to job hunt, of course, the entire country and world fell into chaos. So it was kind of an alarming way for me to learn firsthand some of the things that we think of as being very stable and very secure are not, and can be disrupted in a moment's notice. And so that's part of why I'm so passionate about what I write about in Entrepreneurial You, the importance of developing multiple income streams. Whether people are working for companies or, even if they are entrepreneurs, they might feel like they're diversified because they have a lot of clients. But if you're doing the same thing for all your clients, that's not really diversification. Being able to do a lot of different things enables you to far better weather the storms and the disruptions that inevitably are going to occur.
And while you said nobody was getting fired in 2001, although after September 11th, I'm sure the economy did change quite a bit. You're right at this curve that you talk about in your book. From 1948 to 2000, the job growth rate, you say it was 1.7 times the population. And since then, since 2000, the population growth has been 2.4 times the growth of the job market. And I really started to experience that myself when I graduated in 2008 in a recession as well. But I was already a little further into this transition of jobs maybe going away because of global competition or because of automation could be a big reason for it. There's a lot of macroeconomic reasons why jobs seem to be a little bit less stable. Your book, Entrepreneurial You, is all about diversification. Is there any other things that you would say to convince folks that that maybe careers aren't the safest path? Maybe actually convince my parents that entrepreneurship isn't maybe as dangerous as you might expect.
Well, it's really true. I think that probably the best argument is that if people know one thing about personal finance, it's usually that it is a bad idea to invest all your money in one stock. You know, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. And yet, in so many ways, people do that with their jobs because you are earning one salary from one employer. And if something happens to that company or to that industry, everything can be lost immediately. But meanwhile, if you have a portfolio career, if you are able to develop multiple income streams, you're opening up possibilities for yourself because if something happens, heaven forbid, to one of the ways that you make money, you have other legs of the table to fall back on, and it enables you to be much more resilient. So taking the time now to cultivate that is really one of the most important things that we can do.
So someone's standing on a pogo stick, maybe, if it's not a table, they've got a job. What would you suggest to them to prepare themselves for this? If they've got a good paying job, they're good at it. They don't see anything potentially in the future, at least right now. But I guess you didn't see anything coming. What would you suggest for them to prepare for this less stable economy?
One really good starting point is actually thinking about what you have expertise in and what people are already coming to you for. And I'll explain what I mean. In my new book, Entrepreneurial You, I tell a story about a guy named Dorie. And he was born in Serbia, lives in the US now, and he has a day job. He has a great, successful job as an executive at a Fortune 500 life sciences company. But he also is fascinated with entrepreneurship. And so one of the things that I thought was most compelling about his story, his original foray into entrepreneurship didn't actually even go that well. He was interested in apps, and so he spent his own money creating an app, and it didn't work. You know, one of these typical stories that if it had ended there, we would consider failure. But instead, he actually learned from that. He interrogated it and said, well, what did I do wrong? And what he realized is that he had dreamed up something in isolation that he thought would be a cool idea. He never tested it with anyone. He never validated the premise or actually talked to real consumers. And as a result, his intuition was wrong of what the marketplace wanted. Meanwhile, though, he started to pay attention to something else, which is that people were coming to him because he was actually very successful at his day job and he was getting promoted really fast, and everybody wanted to talk to him about how he was doing it. Oh, what's your secret? How are you making this happen? And so he decided to create an online course about that, about how to get promoted faster. And he realized that was where the interest was. People were already coming to him. They were already asking. And so one of the best things that we can do in being entrepreneurial and thinking entrepreneurially is to say, well, what are people already clamoring for? And so he took that as a hint, and then he went for it. And now he still has his job, which he loves, but he has a side business creating this online course, which has brought him tens of thousands of dollars.
Mm-hmm. I imagine the online course didn't come without people knowing about it, right? How would that person have gotten the word out besides just people in his own network? Or was it just people in his network getting the course from him?
No, you're absolutely right. One of the things that he talks about, and I agree with him entirely, is that sometimes people in the early days of starting an entrepreneurial side venture, they get kind of caught up and sometimes overthink things because they feel like they have to try everything, try every form of marketing, try every form of advertising, and they end up wasting a lot of time and money. And so what Bozy came up with instead was he realized that he should just focus on one channel. If he was going to be successful, he wanted to really get good at something. And so he sells his course strictly through doing webinars, and he books the webinars strictly through affiliate partners. So he reaches out to other people who are in the industry who have an audience that is similar to his, and he says, "Hey, can I do a webinar for your audience?" And then he will pitch. He'll provide an informational interview, but at the end of it, he'll pitch his course for people who want to learn more, and then he will share the profits with the person whose audience it is. So that has been a winning formula for him, but he has not very deliberately spread himself super thin. He hasn't, focused on Facebook ads or any of the, the millions of ways you can do it. He has a system and he's worked very hard at optimizing it. And I think that's part of how he's been successful.
Yeah, that Gary Vaynerchuk be everywhere, or maybe that's Pat Flynn. I'm not sure which one of the two. It's good. It's probably good advice to be in a lot of different locations. It's almost like diversifying where you're going to find your audience. But early on, man, it can just be so overwhelming to try to be everywhere because you don't know how all these different tools work, and it takes a lot of time. Sometimes it can take a lot of money to invest in figuring out how they work and to actually get them to pay you back. And actually in your book too, I think you do a good job of just showing different options, but your book talks about different ways you can make money as an entrepreneur. You could be a coach or a consultant, which is probably one of the lowest barriers to entry. You've got speaking, you've got podcasting, blogging, conferences and masterminds, online classes like we already mentioned, joint ventures, doing affiliate work. So there's a lot of different ways that you can have these different income streams. But I would probably say the same thing when it comes to marketing as well as it comes to creating revenue. Probably just focus on one. How did you find your focus early on? Because you started out more as a coach and a consultant. Why did you pick that over the other alternatives out there?
Well, in some ways, the other alternatives weren't even very fully developed at the time. For instance, I've been running my business since 2006. So at the time we're recording it, it's been 11 years. And a lot of the things that I cover in Entrepreneurial You about ways to leverage the internet for growing your business really weren't even possibilities then. Podcasting was just getting started in 2005. But it was barely on anyone's radar. Videos, video blogs, vlogging is a way that people can make good money these days. YouTube had not even been invented. That was invented in 2006. So I think a lot of these technologies were very nascent. In fact, though, I think that coaching and consulting, it is useful to kind of work through that process for anyone, regardless of the fact that the technology now exists where you could reach millions of people instantly. I actually think it's better not to reach millions of people instantly because there's really a three-step process when it comes to developing yourself as an entrepreneur. The first is building trust with the audience, which comes through sharing your ideas, putting them out there, letting people know how you approach the world and what your ideas are, and letting them see for themselves that you are high quality, that they resonate with your approach, and that they want to hear more from you. The second phase is going deep, where possibly through something like coaching or consulting, you're working with a small, finite number of real people and helping them in a very deep and intimate way solve their problems. And that enables you to get inside the customer's head, understand what they want, what they need, what their challenges are, and what interventions you can take to solve their issues. And once you have that, it's only then that you can scale and really should think about scaling. Otherwise, if you scale too rapidly, you may miss because you don't understand the customer as well as you should, or your solutions may not work as well as you think that they might. But once you've tested it and piloted it, then it's time where you can really go big.
What do people, let's say they go that they figure out what they're good at, and people are telling them or asking them questions over and over again. Hey, how'd you design that website, or how did you build that app, or how did you record that interview, whatever it is that people keep on asking about. So you find that, and then you start working one-on-one with individuals to help them solve that problem. You really start to figure out what it is that the problem is, and then how you solve it. What are some stumbling blocks that people get after that point?
Yeah, I think that's an important question. And that is, one of the earliest stumbling blocks for people, of course, is what should you charge? That's
That's exactly what I was
question
thinking.
that people have. Yeah, it's a fear too, because it is risky. It feels kind of scary to put a number on things. And in fact, there's a guy that I profile in Entrepreneurial named Michael Bungay Stanier, who runs a very successful business training managers to be better coaches. And he had a great line, which is that your price should be fear plus 10%. So, whatever number makes you scared, and then you add 10% to it. But in practical terms, how to think about your pricing, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. Number one is this is where it's really important to have as much market intelligence as possible. Because, in the early days, you're probably just making things up. You have literally no idea. And so the more and the faster you can develop not just a casual contact, but actual friends who are in your industry, the better off you're going to be, because these are folks that you can talk with honestly and get a real sense and perspective about what a viable range is. I think that in many cases, information solves a lot of problems about people mispricing or underpricing. Because, if you've been charging $1,000 for something and you discover that everybody else is charging $5,000, you're probably going to feel a lot bolder in asking for that price. I mean, it's sort of this indignation, right? Hey, I'm just as good as them. Okay, boom, I deserve that. But if you have no information, if you don't know what other people are getting, it feels like a black box, and you might be really worried. Oh my gosh, I don't want to overshoot it. $1,000 is better than nothing. I really ought to take this. So developing a network of close friends in your industry is, that kind of inner circle is a very important step that you can take. I think another one when it comes to pricing is understanding what moves your price. This is really key. And I would say that the most important thing you can do to increase your price is to increase your brand. And what I mean by that is that ultimately what people are paying for in a lot of ways is the insurance that you are going to do a good job. And so the more you can have externally validated credibility in the form of things like, oh, she's been on such and such TV show, or she writes such and such publication, or oh, he's consulted for such and such clients that everybody has heard of. When you have those things, it enables you to raise your price because people feel safer and more secure taking a chance on you because you have been institutionally vetted, and that makes a big difference.
How would you define brand?
Well, these terms get used a lot interchangeably in some ways, but brand is kind of the same thing as your platform, quote unquote, just to use another buzz phrase. Essentially, it's just the question: how well known are you, and what are you known for? And if you are both well known and you are known for being very good at your thing, whatever that thing is, then that is the definition of having a strong brand.
That is very helpful. I've always had a hard time when people say, oh, I'm building my personal brand. It just seems like, So you're getting on Facebook Live. Like I don't know what that means, but being known for something and being known to be able to deliver that actually is a lot more helpful. So it kind of brings things back to your standout book of being a recognized expert, or even probably reinventing you about building a personal brand. And maybe that's why I didn't know what a brand was, because I haven't. That's the one book of yours I haven't read yet. So I'll get cracking on that.
That's right.
Uh,
Nice.
You mentioned building a network and having some people that you can bounce ideas off of for support, and just having information. The flip side of the information game, it's something I see a lot, especially as somebody who teaches people how to take more consistent action and focus on their goals, is the limited amount of attention that we have. And it seems like right now there are so many different ideas and videos and books and podcasts and sources of information that it can be a form of paralysis. So how did you navigate this personally? I don't know if this is something you teach or talk about, but you've been having your career for a number of years, and you seem to have been doing a very good job with it. How do you navigate information consumption versus maybe doing the work or production?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question that you ask, because I am a big believer in phases for all of these things. And so early in my career, I actually spent a disproportionate amount of time reading in my field. And part of the reason for that, honestly, that I could, because early in my career, I didn't have that many clients. And so, I had more free time. And so a way to put that time to productive use is to do reading, canonical reading in your field, so that you can be knowledgeable about who the key players are, what the key terms are, so that you can form an opinion about the debates that are salient in your industry. And that was something that was very useful and valuable to me, because now you can cite people with authority. You can talk about things knowledgeably. I heard a story once about a guy who's a very well-known business speaker. And apparently someone interviewed him and asked about his thoughts on Jim Collins, and he didn't know who Jim Collins was. Now, if your listeners don't know who Jim Collins is, that's okay. But for a prominent business speaker to not know who Jim Collins is, frankly, that's an embarrassment. I would be extremely embarrassed if I was this guy. And Jim Collins, for those who are not up on it, was the author of the bestseller Good to Great. Exactly,
Yeah, of course.
So you gotta know the key people in your field. You have to know what your universe is talking about. So early on, I spent a lot of time doing that. Nowadays, I honestly do it not that much, because I have shifted to a mode of content creation, and I think that you do. There are phases in someone's professional life. If you just keep consuming information forever, that's not that helpful, because if you want to build your brand, if you want to get out there and have your own ideas recognized, there comes a point where you have to sort of flip the switch and you have to start producing it. And it means, just in a zero-sum game, you're going to have less time to be reading other people's stuff. I think it's important to over-index on that early on, and then throttle it back as you're creating more yourself.
That's great. I've never seen it put that way. One thing, I don't even know who told me this, but it stuck with me, was to produce as much as you consume, because a lot of times, especially you as a writer, you probably formulate and crystallize your ideas a lot better while trying to write them down. So at first you probably read a couple books and like, okay, well, what were the main takeaways of that book? And maybe you're regurgitating that. But then as you talk about it, as you write about it, as you speak about it, you become to crystallize your own ideas and your own thoughts. So that's good that there's that early figure-outy stage when you're just reading and consuming a lot. One thing that I'm thinking about doing next after the podcast is starting a YouTube channel. And one of the pieces of advice you gave in your book, which I really appreciated, was go watch some YouTube videos. Find the people that you like and watch them and see what things you want to take away from that, and what things that you might do differently or you might do uniquely. And I think had I not read that, I would have just jumped in and be like, all right, YouTube videos. I know things about productivity. I'm going to just start. I know roughly how to record videos. Let's go. But you've almost given me that permission to consume, because sometimes I feel like, since so many people default to over-consuming, I feel as somebody who is interested in productivity, I want to default towards that other end of the spectrum. So that's wonderful. Well, thank you. I've got 2 questions that I ask everyone who comes on this show to try to build a list of amazing books and tools that I need to check out. So the first one is, what's been your most influential book and why?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I would say that one of the books that I really like best, and it is a business classic, is called The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. It's a classic for deserved reasons, and any small business owner should read it. It is a book about the fundamental misconception that so many people have in starting businesses, that, I like to bake, therefore let me start a bakery. And of course, if you own a bakery, the last thing that you're going to have time for is baking, and you have to learn how to build systems and structure and implement things, and just thinking that through, how to be systematic in scaling your efforts, and what it really means to own a business rather than having a job. So I think that's one that I would really recommend, and it's been important to me.
What's the last system maybe the best system that you've built recently?
Oh man. Well, just thinking structurally, this is I try to systematize a lot of things, and so I actually created a short online course earlier this year called "Be More Productive," which I know many of your listeners are really into productivity. Yeah, yes way. And one of the things that I lay out in there is strategy for goal setting, which is that I am a firm believer in the fact that one of the biggest problems we have is that people have too many goals that they're pursuing at once. And so I limit myself to 2 professional goals at a time, period. And so instead of an annual goal setting exercise, I do it every 6 months so that I'm able to focus more intensely. And so, for instance, right now I am in the mode where, for the latter half of 2017, this is so all encompassing. I went from 2 goals, which is my typical, down to 1. Because I'm like, no, I literally cannot focus on anything else. So my goal is to execute the launch of Entrepreneurial You well. Everything else is by the wayside. But I'm already, I think about things for later on. I haven't acted on this at all. But for the first 6 months of 2018, I'm going to be focusing on learning about Facebook ads and creating good lead funnels for my business. But that's something that I know is coming down the pike, but I am not going to touch until next January.
That's perfect. Yeah, that sounds like a fun, both good systems to have in place. And I've actually got to interview Mr. Gerber, and for his age, he is a firecracker. It's awesome. I'll make sure to put that in the show notes. Another great, just like, Jim Collins, Michael Gerber, one of the fundamentals. Perfect. I'm glad you said that. What about a favorite productivity tool or resource, since you created a whole course on productivity? I'm sure you have a couple.
Sure. One of the ones that I use all the time because I travel so frequently for my business is TripIt. TripIt is a great app. They have a free version and then a paid version. The paid version is about, I think, currently maybe $50 a year, but which I do pay for because I actually think it's valuable. But the greatest thing, it was always so burdensome to me, especially because I traveled so frequently, to just keep all the documents together about, what's your confirmation code, right? Like how many they want a confirmation code for everything, for your hotel, for your car, for your flight. It's horrible. And TripIt allows you very, very easily to keep all of your travel data in one easy to access place. They have a system for kind of cordoning it off and putting it into your calendar and giving you easy access to it so that you don't have to be fumbling for the paperwork anymore. And so that's something that's really been a lifesaver for me.
That's great. Yeah, I've used TripIt for years. Really like that app as well. So glad more people can know about it. Awesome. Well, Dorie, I know you've got another appointment to get to. So where can people find you? And thank you for coming on, as well as hear more about you your work.
Yeah, thank you, Zachary. I appreciate it. It's so great to have this chance to talk with you. Um, I would say the best place for folks to go, and I actually have a free resource for them. If people are interested in really digging deeper into the question of how they can develop multiple income streams in their own business and begin to embrace even more of the entrepreneurial mindset, I've created the 88 question Entrepreneurial You self-assessment, and that is available for free at dorieclark.com/entrepreneur.
All right, I will get that in there. You don't joke around. 88 questions. You're gonna know yourself by the end of that.
That's right.
Well, cool. Dorie, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on, and I look forward to well, I've read that book, so going back and getting Reinventing You. But everyone out there, Entrepreneurial You is a great read, especially if you're trying to figure out where you want to go. There's tons of stories, tons of really good ideas. I've got like 6 things that I want to look up right after reading that book. So thanks again for putting that out there.
Love it. Thank you so much. Great to speak with you.